If you have trouble finding your own watercolor style, in this video, I'm gonna share the technique that allowed me to create those watercolor painting without any tutorial, without any talent. I am a self-taught artist. I have a engineering background, so I was not meant at all to become a watercolor artist. And if you want to know more about the proven system that allows me to create my own watercolor painting without any tutorial, click on the link in the description below. So I just used this technique several days ago, and it all started with this topic, which is a photo taken from one of my students. And at first I thought, oh, okay, it's going to be fine. I'm used to create watercolor landscapes, so it's going to be all right. So here I am using my system in order to interpret whatever topic into a beautiful watercolor painting. And what happened is that the first wash didn't go as expected at all. The thing is that when I first saw this picture, what my intention was that I wanted to convey the summer mood. I wanted people to feel the warmth behind this picture. So that's why I started with very warm color, and then in order to create the shadow on the top of this picture, I decided to go for colder, cooler colors like ultramarine blue and also cobalt turquoise. And during this first wash, I also wanted to define a little bit more the trees. So I created the trees on wet. And this is the result after the first wash has dried. And when I looked at it, I realized that it wasn't at all what I expected, because it doesn't convey any heat. I wanted to have the light here, but I lost the light. And here you can see the final result of the painting, and I can show you the initial topic of this painting. And I was a little bit disappointed because I wanted really to convey the heat in this photo, and I wanted the light to shine from this painting, and the painting that I came up with didn't convey exactly this message that I wanted to send. And when I find myself with that kind of discrepancy between what I have in mind and the final painting that I get, I tend to give up, to tell myself like, I don't know how to paint, this is ugly, this isn't exactly what I expected. But the thing is that watercolor has its own life, so we have to let it do its own stuff. However, by rejecting what watercolor could give me here, I would have learned nothing. And in order to overcome that, what happened is that a few days later, I made a painting session with my students. And here, what I told them is that, okay, this painting isn't exactly what I had in mind. However, what could be interesting here is, instead of considering this painting as a failure because it didn't go as planned, what we could ask ourselves is, what do I like in this painting? What is working in this painting? So this is the first step. And the answer was, I like the kind of the foggy atmosphere. It's almost as if we have something like an imaginary landscape here. And then the second step is, and this is exactly the question I asked my students, okay, now that we consider that the foggy mood is a good thing, what exactly convey this foggy mood? And then the students, they told me, maybe it's because here we have some kind of a fog here. Maybe it's also because you have in the trees some lights that go through the trees. And at the same time, the shadow here at first that I wanted to paint, it isn't exactly a shadow anymore, because the transition between the dark and the cool colors and the warm colors is much smoother than the one that we can see on the photo. And by identifying exactly what convey this mood and this atmosphere, then you are not anymore into a kind of a failure mindset, but instead you are in a kind of a learning mindset. And then the last step is, okay, now take one element as an hypothesis. Like in this painting, what I told them is, let me go backward. Okay, in this painting, like what I told them is, maybe the foggy atmosphere is conveyed by, as you can see here in the wet on wet, I created small trees that are in a soft edges. And if you look back at how I painted this one, here you can see the trees that I created in the first wash. And then in the final painting, you have this result. And maybe those trees that were created in the first wash, they were part of this foggy atmosphere. So let's go back to the workshop that I did with my students. And as you can see, what I told them is, okay, let's test now. Let's try to replicate this atmosphere. And here you can see I tried to replicate my first wash without creating the trees in the first wash. And by doing so, we were able to isolate this hypothesis and then see if we still have this foggy atmosphere. And if yes, it means that the trees in the first wash didn't play an important role into this foggy atmosphere. And if the foggy atmosphere doesn't work, then it means that the trees in the first wash play a huge role in this foggy atmosphere. And as you can see, I added the trees, and here is the result. And now you tell me, you can tell me in the comments, yes, I can see that we still have this foggy atmosphere. And maybe not. But this answer alone, this is exactly what allowed me to find my own watercolor style without copying any watercolor tutorial. And this is a learning process that allows you to really dive deep into how you paint, how you can unpack the way you are creating your own watercolor painting, and how you can replicate everything that watercolor can bring you. Because oftentimes we rely too much on watercolor's luck. What I call watercolor's luck is how watercolor can create beautiful and marvels in no time. However, if you don't know how to reproduce those marvels, it will remain as watercolor's luck. But it's very difficult to create and to find your own style based solely on luck. What you need to do is to find exactly the elements that triggers the emotion, that triggers a wow, this is exactly what I wanted to create. And by doing so, you will be able to replicate or to recycle what you find out into your future and other paintings. And this is exactly what I did with my students. I told them, you know what? Let's try another painting based on this photo, but now with another painting, because maybe here the hypothesis was maybe the colors were played a huge role in this foggy atmosphere. So let's find out and let's try another color combination. And the students, they told me, oh, let's try pinkish colors. So I told them, okay, let's try this one. And then I created this first wash. And then I created the trees here with the shadows. And as you can see, you can tell, is this foggy landscape still in this painting, or does it disappear? So here my thinking is that, yes, indeed, I find that we have less this foggy effects in this painting. So maybe the colors play a big role in this foggy effect. And now you can see that we filter and we filter again through one hypothesis, a second hypothesis, and in the end, you will come up with, okay, if I want to create a foggy effect, maybe I should use these colors instead of these colors. And by doing so, what you will do is to bring awareness on your own way of painting instead of copying another master's watercolor painting, and you don't know exactly what worked, what really worked, and what you could have replaced by your own techniques. You don't know that. But by analyzing your own paintings, you will find out new ways of painting, and those way of paintings are truly yours. So as a recap, and this is the technique that allowed me to create my own painting without copying anything. First step is, instead of blaming yourself for not succeeding, you can ask yourself, okay, this is something that I don't like in this painting, but what do I like in this painting? Then you will identify like an emotion, a mood, an atmosphere, or one part of the painting. The second step is, okay, what element exactly triggered this emotion? What element exactly made this part of the painting work? And in this second step, you will come up with something like, okay, the colors play a huge role, or maybe the technique, the painting techniques, or maybe the drawing here, or maybe the trees in the first wash in our example. And then the last step is to test this hypothesis. Let's try to reproduce this effect, this emotion, thanks to the elements that you spotted in the second step. And by doing so, you will come up with one result, and you will make the conclusion, does it work or does it not work? And if it does work, it will confirm that this element, this hypothesis was right. And if it doesn't necessarily mean that this element doesn't play a huge role. Sometimes the execution is not exactly the same as the first try, but oftentimes I found that those elements weren't as relevant as I thought. And by iterating on this three-step process, you set yourself right to find your own watercolor style. So let me know if this technique was helpful. Now that you know the technique in order to find your own watercolor style, here is the video where I explained exactly how I broke free from the watercolor tutorials in order to create my own paintings. And if you want to know more about my proven system to create my own watercolor painting, check the link in the description below.